So, as you know, the other girl laid a wreath on Anzac Day, and the note attached to the wreath was a handwritten note, as these notes traditionally are. And the notes are a solemn and very meaningful gesture, and the occasion rightly deserves the solemnity. And however, this is why you see, sometimes the trap you set for other people ends up being the trap you yourself get caught in. Because what then happened was that very eagle-eyed observers identified 3 separate spelling errors in the note. Australia apparently appears to have been spelt incorrectly. The word ultimate appears to have been misspelled. Also, the word sacrifice appears to have been misspelled as well. Now, these are not obscure words. These are like common, relatively common, I would say, words. They're not particularly difficult. And yeah, at the end of the day, Australia is the name of the country whose soldiers the wreath was specifically laid to honor. And ultimate and sacrifice are words that tend to appear in commemorative contexts so regularly that anyone who's attended more than one, right? If you've attended more than one of such service, you would have encountered those words at least a dozen times, at least, because everyone in the speeches, in the preaching, in church, in the hymns, everything, you'd find the word sacrifice and ultimate sacrifice, giving your life and for your country, etc., etc. So, but I'm a fair person. I always like to be fair. And I want to be fair about a few things before I continue with this video. And I just want to say that handwritten notes under pressure and in public can produce errors that would not occur in a very relaxed private setting. So I also feel that spelling doesn't necessarily correlate with intelligence or capability in any simple or direct way, because, I know many people who are dyslexic. I even believe sometimes I'm slightly dyslexic. And I noticed that from when I was a child, because I would mix up certain letters, but so I don't believe that, spelling correlates with intelligence at all, actually. So I know people who are very highly competent in many areas, and sometimes they struggle with spelling. So it's definitely not a character failing. In fact, it can be a disability. But then again, when you think about it, I know many dyslexics that see patterns that many normal people wouldn't see. So I feel sometimes when you misspell stuff, it can actually be a sign of a different type of intelligence. But in this person's case, in the other girl's case, because the other girl was the one who laid the wreath, and she and her husband signed that note, I believe there are 2 specific contexts, right, that makes this more than a simple individual error. And I think it's definitely worth noting, and then maybe we just move on from it. So the first is that this is not the first time that the other girl cannot spell. There was a time, I believe, around the pandemic, and they were at a train station, I believe in Scotland, and all she had to do was copy from a piece of paper that she held in front of her, and she had to copy from that onto a board. And she misspelled, and I believe I caught it at the time, she misspelled a couple of words, including country. The country one really resonated. So all I know is that that's number one. So she's done it before, misspelled. And also, we need to note something. A lot of the previous commemorative notes, right, they have the same wording and they have the same characteristics. You write the same old thing. So when you are committing a pattern of errors on formal public documents, that is different to a single mistake under pressure. To me, it suggests that either the notes are not proofread before they are attached to wreaths at national commemorations, or they are written very quickly without any care. Because an occasion like that demands a lot of care. If you know that spelling is not your strong thing, you can always you can always either take a quick snap of it and send it to someone, or you can show it to people around you. And this is what I don't understand, that these people have resources available to them and they don't use those resources. If something is not correctly spelled, is it a crime for you to tell your principal that this is not correctly spelled? Is that the extent of the babying that there is within that, within that institution, that nobody is bold enough or courageous enough to come forward and say, actually, that's incorrectly spelled and that's going to be embarrassing for you. So how about we write another note? I don't know, because these things tend to baffle me. And I'm thinking, who's running this operation? Who's running it? So I would have thought, that at the very least, somebody would proofread. And also, I think I'm going to bring in another context here. And it's the very, very sustained, and I would say even specific criticism that is often directed at Meghan for her calligraphy. Now, Meghan's handwriting is excellent. The girl learned calligraphy. She clearly practiced calligraphy, and she made a living from it. She made a living from teaching calligraphy as well as addressing invitations, so wedding invitations, etc., etc. And Meghan's handwriting, as you know, has been commented on extensively and almost entirely, in my opinion, positively, except for the occasional deranger. Although there was another reporter who said she feels that Meghan's loops and curlicles, I think I did a video about it, Meghan's loops and curlicles were attacking her or something like that. But anyway, her handwriting is excellent. Her note writing, her addressed envelopes, her formal correspondence, again, they've all been cited as evidence of her attention to detail. And also the fact that she personally invested in the gestures that she made. So making sure the handwriting's good, the notes are nicely aligned. And again, that is Meghan. That is the level of meticulousness that a note attached to a wreath that's going to be shown globally, that's the extent of meticulousness that deserves. And yet, the broader media environment that praises Meghan's penmanship also found reasons to criticize her. So they criticized the presentation, her intelligence, and the fact that she is prepared and suitable for public life. Meanwhile, we had the other girl who literally added an extra I to Australia as if she wanted to spell Austria and then changed her mind. And this was on a wreath for Australian soldiers on Anzac Day. So, go figure. Meghan's calligraphy scrutinized for evidence of inauthenticity, and at the end of the day, the standard is not applied the same. This is the, what's the word I'm looking for? This is the hypocrisy and the frustration that I have against our media. Because at the end of the day, they keep telling us that this woman is going to be future queen. And yet we are getting schoolgirl errors like this. Very basic stuff that shouldn't be happening. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, please. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Luxpreneur. And for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and please hit the subscribe button. And make sure you are subscribing to the right channel, which is Elizabeth Solaru 4970. It's the only channel I have on this platform. And to support my work in holding truth to power, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Elizabeth Solaru, or you can get a copy of my book, The Luxpreneur, from Amazon, Waterstones, or Barnes & Noble.
Kate's spelling errors at the Cenotaph. A failure of standards the occasion did not deserve. On Anzac Day, Kate laid a wreath at the Cenotaph in Whitehall. A solemn, meaningful gesture that the occasion demands be treated with care and deliberateness. The handwritten note attached to that wreath, as is tradition, contained 3 spelling errors. Australia, the name of the very country whose fallen soldiers the wreath was laid to honour, appears to have been misspelled, as do the words ultimate and sacrifice. Words so embedded in the language of commemoration that anyone who has attended even a handful of such services would have encountered them repeatedly. To be fair, handwritten notes produced under public pressure can yield errors that a relaxed private moment would not, and spelling ability does not map neatly onto intelligence or character. But fairness also requires acknowledging context, and here the context matters considerably. This is reportedly not the first time such errors have appeared on Kate's commemorative notes, which transforms a single understandable mistake into a pattern, one that suggests either an absence of proofreading or an absence of the careful attention the occasion demands. That context becomes sharper still when set against the sustained, detailed scrutiny applied to Meghan's calligraphy, which has been examined forensically and praised for its precision, its authenticity, and its evidence of personal investment. Both women are being judged. The standards being applied are not the same. A university-educated woman who has attended commemorative events for 15 years and who will one day be Queen Consort of a realm that includes Australia, laid a wreath with Australia spelled incorrectly on the note. The institution that prides itself on preparing Kate for her future role could reasonably ensure that notes attached to wreaths at national commemorations receive one final check before they are tied on. That is not a demanding standard. It is simply the minimum that Anzac Day requires. The future Queen Consort misspelled 3 words on a note. Attached to the wreath at the Cenotaph. On Anzac Day, Kate laid a wreath at the Cenotaph in Whitehall, and attached to that wreath was a handwritten note, a traditional and solemn gesture, entirely fitting for the gravity of the occasion. Eagle-eyed observers, however, identified 3 spelling errors within that note: Australia, ultimate, and sacrifice. These are not obscure words tucked away in the margins of some specialist vocabulary. Australia is the name of the very country whose fallen soldiers the wreath was laid to honour. Ultimate and sacrifice are words that appear so routinely in commemorative contexts that anyone who has attended even a handful of such services would have encountered them scores of times. Kate's spelling errors at the Cenotaph deserve more than a passing glance. It is worth pausing before drawing conclusions, because there are genuine mitigating factors here. Handwritten notes produced under pressure in public at solemn occasions where emotion and formality both weigh heavily are not the same as text composed calmly at a desk with a dictionary to hand, and errors that would never appear in a relaxed private setting can surface under precisely those conditions. Spelling ability, moreover, does not correlate in any direct or simple way with intelligence or capability, and it would be reductive to suggest otherwise. There are highly competent, deeply thoughtful people in every profession and walk of life who have always found spelling difficult, and that difficulty says nothing meaningful about their character, their diligence, or their fitness for the roles they occupy. When errors become a pattern. Kate's repeated spelling mistakes on commemorative notes. This reportedly is not the first time. That detail matters more than it might initially appear, because a single error on a handwritten note under pressure is one thing, while a pattern of errors on formal public documents is something else entirely. When similar characteristics have been observed on previous commemorative notes, the explanation of an isolated slip under difficult circumstances becomes harder to sustain. What the pattern suggests, rather uncomfortably, is that these notes are either not being proofread before they are attached to wreaths at national commemorations, or that they are being written very quickly, without the care and deliberateness that the occasion genuinely demands. Anzac Day is not a rushed calendar obligation. It is a solemn and specific act of national remembrance, and the note accompanying a wreath is part of that act. The words on it should be correct. That is not an elevated standard. It is simply the standard the moment requires. The double standard behind the wreath. It is worth pausing on this particular detail because it reveals something uncomfortable about the media environment both women inhabit. Meghan's calligraphy has been extensively praised, held up repeatedly as evidence of her care, her thoughtfulness, her personal investment in the gestures she makes. Her addressed envelopes and handwritten notes have been examined and admired, cited as proof that she takes these things seriously. And yet the very same media environment that celebrates the elegance of Meghan's penmanship has found, consistently and with considerable enthusiasm, reasons to question her intelligence, her preparation, her suitability for public life. Kate, by contrast, misspells 3 words on a note attached to a wreath at a national commemoration, including the name of the country whose soldiers the wreath was specifically laid to honour, and the scrutiny is notably quieter, the commentary more measured, the charitable explanations more readily offered. Both women are being judged. That much is not in dispute. What is in dispute is whether the standard being applied to each of them bears any resemblance to the other. It does not, and a media landscape that cannot see that inconsistency or sees it and chooses not to say so is telling us something important about which woman it has already decided to protect. A queen in waiting who cannot spell the name of her future realm. It is worth pausing on the fuller picture here. Kate is university educated. She has been attending commemorative events for 15 years, meaning she has stood at cenotaphs, laid wreaths, and absorbed the language of sacrifice and remembrance on dozens of occasions across more than a decade. She will one day be Queen Consort of a realm that includes Australia, a country whose name one might reasonably expect would be as familiar to her as her own. And yet the institution that has repeatedly and publicly described itself as carefully preparing Kate for the weight and responsibility of her future role apparently does not have a system in place to ensure that the notes attached to wreaths at national commemorations are checked before they are fixed to the flowers. That is not a demanding standard. It is not an unreasonable expectation. It is simply the baseline level of care that the occasion requires and that the soldiers being honoured deserve. If the palace can coordinate the logistics of a public appearance at one of the most solemn events in the Commonwealth calendar, it can ensure that someone reads the note before it is tied on. The future Queen Consort misspelled. 3 words on a note. Attached to the wreath at the cenotaph. The royal family has described itself as preparing Kate carefully for her future role, and that is precisely why this matters. Checking the spelling on a note before attaching it to a wreath at a national commemoration is not a demanding standard. It is the minimum the occasion requires. These are solemn events. The people being honoured gave everything they had, and the gesture of laying a wreath, however traditional and however well-intentioned, is only as respectful as the care taken in making it. An institution that presents itself as thorough in its preparation of a future Queen Consort, that speaks of readiness and duty and service, should be able to ensure that the name of a country is spelled correctly on a note laid in that country's honour. That is not a criticism that requires nuance or qualification. It is a basic observation about what institutional respect for these occasions looks like in practice. The future Queen Consort misspelled 3 words on a note attached to the wreath at the cenotaph. Anzac Day honours people who gave everything. Soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice, and yes, that word matters here, deserve a standard of care in how they are commemorated that reflects the solemnity of the occasion. A handwritten note attached to a wreath laid at the cenotaph is not a casual gesture. It is a formal, public act of remembrance, and the words on that note carry weight precisely because of what the day represents. If such a note contains errors, those errors should be caught before the wreath is ever tied. That is not asking a great deal. It is asking for one additional read, one quiet moment of care before the note is attached and the cameras begin to roll. The occasion demands it. The people being honoured deserve nothing less.